Let's talk about the GoPro Hero 7 Black and how you can use it to shoot travel videos. There are some more general tips, but there are also some more in-depth tips about the settings and so on. So let's get started with the very basic, and that is that you should see the GoPro as a storytelling tool. And now I mentioned this tip already 2 weeks before in another GoPro tips video that I did, but that was not specifically for travel filmmaking. So I want to mention that here as well again, because the GoPro is so good for storytelling. Like something is happening around you, you don't have much time, and simply what you do is you take out your GoPro, you press one button and you get the shot. So it's perfect for storytelling. You can also like use a small tripod to put it everywhere, film yourself, how you go to some places or whatever, and that makes it so good as a storytelling tool, because at the end you will recognize, especially on YouTube, that people don't care too much about the quality of the video. Sometimes they care more about the storytelling. Like for example, look Casey Neistat's videos. Of course they look quite nice, you use the DSLR for that and so on, but it's far away from cinematic quality. It's far away from some quality that a lot of YouTubers produce that have a lot less followers than him, but he always tells great story, he's funny, has a good character and so on. So this is what people love, and this is what is more important at the end. So always try that. Also put yourself in the shot and tell a story. Just make the video engaging for the visitor, and the GoPro is a great camera for that. So the next point, of course, before you even start shooting, is that you want to set up your GoPro so that it captures nice footage. And before you set your GoPro up, you should be clear about how much color grading you want to do, because a lot of YouTubers don't mention that. I also didn't mention that in my other videos, which is simply because when it comes to cinematic settings and so on, is that everyone basically tells you around the same settings, like use a flat profile, use native and so on. But to be honest, if you're not good with color grading, then all of that stuff can actually make your videos worse. I'm not saying that you shouldn't learn color grading. It's quite the opposite. I want you to learn color grading because it can really improve your videos a lot. But if you're just starting out and you want to make sure that your GoPro video looks great, then you probably don't want to have the like flattest setting or native white balance or whatever, because it's really hard to handle in post. So I keep it at 3 stages. So the first stage that you should do when you don't want to do so much color grading, when you really have no experience and you just want to make your very first steps with color grading, then just keep the GoPro profile, the color profile, at the normal profile, or GoPro color profile it's called, and not as flat, because that really is the easiest way to grade your footage. It's not the way that you make your footage look the best, but at least it's easy to edit, so it will not look completely bad. Then the second stage is when you want to add some slight color grading, like you want to add a little bit of contrast, maybe a little bit of saturation in post, and you maybe want to apply a LUT or anything like that. You can also apply a LUT actually when you shoot GoPro color profile, but then it's a bit easier. But even with GoPro color profile, just play a bit around and post what you can do to the colors, how you can change it, try to apply some LUTs, try to add a little bit of contrast, or maybe raise the shadows a little bit and so on. Just play a bit around with that. But in stage 2, you choose the flat color profile. And this color profile flattens out your image, so when it comes straight off the GoPro, it doesn't look as nice as the GoPro profile, but it gives you more flexibility to color grade the videos. So in that case, you definitely have to add contrast, you have to raise the saturation a bit, and you either want to create your own look or you want to apply a LUT, whatever you want to do with it, but it gives you more flexibility. So if you want to do a bit more color grading, and if you already tried a bit, if you already know a bit how color grading works, then choose the flat color profile. Then there's also the stage 3, and this is the hardest to color grade, but also the setting that gives you the most flexibility. And that is simply that you set it to color profile flat and also the white balance to native. So you have to adjust your white balance in post, you have to add contrast, and you have to add saturation to get it to a usable image that from that point you can take to add some LUTs or to create your own look or whatever you want to do with it. That gives you the most flexibility. It's also very good, I figured out, to match your GoPro footage with other cameras. You can also do it with a flat color profile, but native makes it a bit easier when you know color grading, of course. When you're not that good with color grading, then not. And yeah, so these are the 3 stages and the 3 main settings. So like that you want to keep in mind before you even set up your camera, like how much color grading you want to do later in post and how is your skill level. So really think about that. Yeah, and apart from that, what you want to do then, let's just take out the GoPro here. I'm actually sitting on my back. So let's get into the settings. So the first thing that you want to do before you set up your camera is to update your firmware, because a lot of people wrote in my comments over recent GoPro videos that they tried to set it up like I told them and it didn't work. And for example, 4K 60 with hyper smooth stabilization doesn't work in the normal firmware that comes with a GoPro, so you have to upgrade. So do the upgrade first and then you go into your settings. And what I do, like generally I shoot in 4K 60 FPS for 60p, simply because then I can create some slow motion. Like I publish my videos in 24p, but I shoot in 60, so I have more frames per second than I need actually later in the final video, and that allows me to stretch the clips, to slow down my footage so that I have some nice slow motion effects. And that's also good because even if I just record maybe 2 seconds with my GoPro, then I can still use the footage even if it would actually be too short. And the reason for that is that I can simply slow it down later, and then like 2 seconds become 4 or 5 seconds depending on how much I slow it down. You can actually slow it down up to 40% if you publish in 24, so that's actually a reason to publish in 24. But also there are some other shots. For example, when I talk into the camera, like the GoPro, then I usually shoot in 4K 24 because I don't need 60 FPS then, because I will not slow it down anyway. So it wouldn't make any sense to shoot in 60. It counts for every camera at the end. And yeah, of course, maybe you have a slow computer or whatever, so then 4K can be a problem, and especially 4K 60 because it's recorded in HEVC, what needs a better computer and so on. So if you don't have a good computer and if 4K is not that important for you, then you might want to publish your videos later in 1080p. Also, I recommend 24. You can also use 25 FPS or 30, up to you. But what you want to shoot then in, you want to set it to 2.7K resolution. I wouldn't go for 1080p simply because when you shoot in 1080 and you publish in 1080, you cannot do much with your image anymore, because you cannot crop in the image without losing that much quality that's actually visible and so on. So definitely shoot in 2.7K in that case and publish in 1080p, because then you can still crop in the image and so on, and that gives you more flexibility in post. So just a quick tip here that speeds up your video workflow a bit, especially if you have a slower computer. And the other settings that you want to do is of course turn the hyper smooth stabilization on. It's very important. It makes your videos so much better. I always have it on. It's never that I turn it off. Then Pro Tune, of course, on. Shutter, I have it to auto, which is generally not good when you shoot in other cameras. But like I said in the beginning, the advantage of the GoPro is that you take it out, you press a button, and then you get the shot. And you don't get the shot if you're under or overexposed. So if you want to set your shutter and everything manually, if you want to expose manually, you at first need ND filters, and then you need to go in the menu all the time and set everything up. So that just sucks and you don't get the shot then. So set your shutter speed to auto. EV compensation, right now I actually have it to 0 because I was recording my face before, and then the face is most important and the backlight not so, and so on. But generally I have it to -0.5 or -1. So what it does is it darkens your image a little bit so that you get more details in the highlights. In a lot of cases when you shoot travel videos, the sky is actually important if you shoot a landscape and so on. And it happens pretty quick that when you're at 0 that it overexposes the sky, so you cannot see anything anymore in the sky. And by underexposing a little bit, like -0.5 or -1, helps by rescuing the sky. So just play a bit around with that and find your setting. It also depends a bit on the situation. If you know it's a day where you shoot a lot away from the sun, then you can probably leave it to 0. But especially if you shoot into the sun, then maybe you want to lower it a little bit so that the sun doesn't get too big and so on. So it really depends a bit on the situation, but that's some general settings that work quite good. Apart from that, white balance, either when you do a lot of color grading, like mentioned before, you can set it to native. Apart from that, you want to adjust your white balance depending on the conditions. So what I generally do is I set it to 6500K when it's cloudy, and I set it to 5500K when it's sunny, because that's like the general values that you use for cloudy and sunny days. But apart from that, you sometimes have days where the clouds are changing all the time. Like today, actually, the clouds are moving. So right now I have sun. Maybe at the end of the video in between we will have some shadow. So in that case, you would have to readjust your white balance all the time. This is actually the right way to do. So if you have the time, do it. But what you can also do to make it easier is to simply set it to white balance 6000 and then just adjust the white balance a little bit in post. Yeah, and apart from that, you can use auto white balance, of course, but I wouldn't suggest that, because then every shot of you looks different. And even if you add your color grades and so on, if you apply some LUTs, then it's not nice to look if every shot looks slightly different from the colors. So that doesn't look nice. So at least have a constant white balance. So apart from that, you want to set it to ISO minimum 100, ISO maximum 400. You can also choose 200 actually over the day, but sometimes I'm suddenly in low light situations. That's why I keep it to 400, but I wouldn't set it higher. Like ISO 800 is already not really usable anymore. So don't use ISO 800. Sharpness, I set it to medium, because when you set it to high, it has this like digitalized, overly sharpened look. That's not nice, of course. So medium, I found out, is the settings that I like the most. You can set it to low if you want to, but medium works quite nice. I personally have my color set to flat, but we talked about that in the beginning. Then raw audio, I don't have that on. And of course mics, I have it set to stereo, because when you set the microphones to auto, so it switches all the time between stereo and suppressing noise, then it just doesn't sound good. And apart from the settings, what you probably also want to do is you want to get some accessoires for the GoPro. And I actually personally, I don't use any accessoires apart from my tripod. I find that a tripod as a travel videographer for your GoPro and also general cameras is the most important thing, because I can put my camera everywhere and that's great. And of course you don't need a like big tripod or anything like that, like of aluminium or whatever. You can simply use a Gorilla pod or a like this Photo Pro pods. I actually use one of those. They're a bit cheaper and they're also more flexible and durable in my opinion and from my experience. So just get a small tripod for it at least. And the other accessoires like ND filters, like mentioned before, I have the shutter speed to auto anyway, so I don't really use ND filters for that, so there's no need. Apart from that, you might want to choose for some mounting options. Let's say you want to drive a lot of motorbike and you want to get shots where the camera is attached to the motorbike. Then of course get some mounts for that and you're good to go. But apart from that, I would say you don't really need other accessoires. Some people use a gimbal, but I mean, I will come to that later to get stable footage. I actually did another video about that. But you don't really need a gimbal for the GoPro Hero 7 because the stabilization is already so good, and especially if you walk slowly and with small steps, then it will be good enough and you really don't need a gimbal. So yeah, the most important things here are really batteries, a tripod, and maybe other mounting options if you need it. So apart from that, you don't really need accessoires, I would say. So only get them if you really think that they can add to the kind of videos that you want to produce. But let's come to the more interesting part of that video, and that is how you can actually get great shots for your travel videos. And my first and probably the most important tip is that you should not press record and walk around and just shoot everything. Instead, just think in terms of shots that are somewhere between 3 and 15 seconds long, because well, then you automatically focus more on one specific thing that you want to get a shot of, and that makes your videos so much better. Because at the end, how you cut a travel video is at the end that you cut the single clips that you have to the beat of the music. So if you just walk around, it's at first a hard time to find the places or the parts of the video that you can actually use, and you have to throw a lot of that away, so it actually wastes a lot of your SD card space and also on the computer, of course. And apart from that, it's a like mental thing, I would say. If I record all the time, then I just point my camera randomly everywhere. But if you think, let's say you're in front of a building and you want to get a shot of that building, then you think about, okay, how can I get a shot of this specific building now? What is a nice angle? Can I put something between me or between the camera and the building? Maybe your girlfriend or whoever. So you start thinking about more how you can make your shots really look nice. So really, The most important thing here is to think in terms of 3 to 15 seconds shots. 15 should already be where usually my shots are somewhere between 3 and 8 seconds. And then when you produce a lot of these single shots, you can later put them easily together to a video, and it will help you a lot to make every single shot look better. And the next point to get great GoPro travel shots, of course, is to use the wide angle of the GoPro to get epic landscape shots or from building or whatever. So what you generally want to do, you want to show this like big epic scenery or whatever you have there. And what also can be nice, it's not a must always, but if you have the option especially, then put like your girlfriend or like a friend or whoever into the shot, because it always looks nice to have a like scenery with a person in front. Of course, it's not the only shot that you should do, you can do a lot more with it, but generally speaking, these are good shots that you can do. And you should always be aware of that you always have this wide angle look, so you should always choose shots and angles that look good with a wide angle. I actually got a bit more in-depth about that in the video that I published 2 weeks before. This is the shot how to get better footage with your GoPro. I will just link it here in the description, so you can check that out as well if you want to get a bit more in-depth about that topic. What's also important, what I mentioned in that video, is that you should be aware of the distortion that comes from the wide angle of the GoPro, so that affects a bit on where you can put your subject without making it look distorted, for example. So that's really important. And of course, another really important point here regarding getting good shots is that you should bring movements in your shots. And this is actually the reason why I told you in the beginning to have hyper smooth stabilization always turned on, because that makes it so easy to get like smooth cinematic movement in your shots. So what you can do, for example, you can do some side movements, like let's say I have the like grass here in front of me, so if I would want to get a shot now with a GoPro, I would probably just take the GoPro here. Let's just do that pretty quick. Yeah, it's on, and then I would just move it sidewise. Of course, it doesn't look very professional right now, I know. And I will just put it in here, and then I have like a small revealing shot, for example. So use the GoPro to bring movements in your shots. Of course, I also mentioned in the other video, like the last video that I mentioned, that you should watch for the distortion. Like right now in the clip that I shot here, you can actually see the distortion pretty good because of the movement, but you can do it sometimes, you can get away with it, but generally you should make either very like small movements and slow, because then the distortion becomes less visible, and you can also do like very quick movements for transitions and so on, because then it's so quick that the viewer cannot see that. And apart from that, motion that really works always good with a GoPro is when you move forward or backward. I also mentioned that in the other video, and I got a bit more in-depth about it, so yeah, definitely check that video out. I already mentioned it all the time. And apart from that, what you can also do to get better shots with your GoPro, especially shots that make your travel videos a lot more interesting, is to shoot time and hyperlapses. So for time lapses, I also already produced a video about that, where I give like more general tips, and I show you why it's a good camera for time lapse. I will also link that video here. There are also some settings in there. And apart from that, you also want to shoot hyperlapses, which is basically a time lapse, but where you move the camera. And for time lapses, I really want to give you the tip here that you should not do what everyone does in the review videos, like just holding the GoPro in front of you and walking through the city. It's so boring, to be honest, and it doesn't look even good, because you just see some like weird movement of people around you, and the complete time, or hyperlapse in that case, doesn't have a real like point that you want to get a shot of. It just doesn't look nice, in my opinion. It's not cinematic or anything. Like it's just people find it cool because, oh, I can produce hyperlapses, but that's not how you make a good looking video. So instead, really use hyperlapses if you have a specific point. For example, in my GoPro Hero 7 cinematic videos, there are a lot of hyperlapses in there. Like, for example, hyperlapses where I have a Buddhist temple in Thailand, and I just walk a straight line in front of the temple while pointing the GoPro to the temple. I'm in the time warp mode, I think, in that case, and I just try to keep the temple as much in the center as possible of the image, and then later I also stabilize it a bit more in post, and I sped it up even more to get a like really cool hyperlapse. And that looks great because it has a specific point. I focus on a subject in that case, in that hyperlapse, and that makes it more interesting, and it's not like just running randomly around with a camera. So that makes your travel videos a lot better. What you can also do, of course, with hyperlapses is when you drive a motorbike or you drive a car or whatever, you can just point it forward. So then you could argue that it also doesn't have a real point because you're just driving, but sometimes in travel videos you want to show how you get to one place to another, and then of course it makes sense from a storytelling perspective to have a hyperlapse like that. So in that case you can use it, but I wouldn't just hold it in front of me and walk through the city or anything like that. It just looks amateurish. So yeah, like use time lapses and hyperlapses, and you can actually use them a lot, but use them with propose please and make sure that they make some sense in your video. And that's it for the shooting part already, at least for the most important tips, because I would say the rest is more up to your creativity. That's really what makes your videos different from other videos at the end. Also, of course, what you make your videos about. But of course, after shooting everything, you have to do video editing. You have to cut your videos and you have to color grade and so on. And so I also have some tips regarding that. And the first tip, of course, is to get a proper video editing app. So the best apps out there, if you want to get a free one, then use DaVinci Resolve. If you are willing to spend some money, then I would strongly suggest to use Final Cut Pro 10 if you're on a MacBook Pro. But if you're not on a MacBook Pro, yeah, use DaVinci please. Some people also use Premiere, actually a lot of people, but Premiere is pretty slow and buggy. It's actually slower than DaVinci and Final Cut. Especially on a Mac, Adobe Premiere is so slow that I wouldn't use it at all. If you're on a Windows computer and you have a good graphics card and so on, then Premiere would also work well. I personally cut in Final Cut Pro 10 because I'm on a MacBook Pro, and so I have to have the fastest editing app possible, and that's Final Cut, so there's no other option for me. And if you're on a MacBook, then there's probably also no other option for you. Otherwise, if you use DaVinci Resolve, you have to cut in 1080p and not in 4K, because 4K will be very slow. But apart from that, like, how do you start? How do you start cutting your video? So the first thing that I usually do when I cut a travel video or vlogs is that I sort out my footage in the normal like browser or Finder on Mac that I have, because then I can simply like delete all the clips that I don't like at all. Sometimes I have some clips that are double then where I cannot really decide what of these two versions I like more, so I leave them both in, but I'm really strict. Usually every clip that I don't like at all gets deleted, and even if there are some like small issues that I think that wouldn't look good in the final video, I also delete it directly. And the big advantage with that is that then I can get into Final Cut and I can just drag all the clips that I have into my timeline, so that usually they are already sorted in an order that can give a story, especially if you shoot a vlog. If for a normal travel video it could be a bit different, but especially if you shoot a vlog, then it's usually that the clips are already around in that order that you want to have it. Of course, after that, not every clip fits perfectly into the storyline, so you maybe want to drag some clips around so that they are in an order that makes sense, and then you can start cutting. So that's really important to do that at first, and that will actually save you a lot of time cutting that later, because what you do then in the second step is that you simply add your music track that you want to use, and then, especially if you know some shortcuts that you should learn in your video editor, then you can cut very quickly. Usually there are some keyboard shortcuts that you can use, so you press a combination of keys and then directly it cuts the clip and automatically deletes the rest and moves everything together and so on. So it depends a bit on your video editor what shortcuts you have there, so just research them, just put in your video editor on Google plus shortcuts and then you will find it. And yeah, that can really speed up your editing workflow a lot, because you have your clips all in the timeline already, then you put your music under it and you just make cut, 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 cut. And the way how you place your cuts is that you cut to the beat. So a song usually has like bum, 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 bum. So you always cut like cut, 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 cut. And that automatically makes it look good because your cutting fits the music. That's the like easiest way of cutting. And of course, in some songs you have like off beats in between. For example, a song goes like bam tsuk, bam tsuk, bam tsuk. Then you can also cut on the tsuk. So you can, for example, cut like cut, 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 and then cut on a zig and cut again. So in that case, you can bring a bit of variety into the cutting, because when you just cut in exactly the same timing all the time, it becomes a bit boring. So you want to adjust it to the music, you want to use offbeats, and maybe if the music gets slower or more intense or less intense or whatever, then you also want to adjust the length of your clips a little bit to fit the music. And yeah, a question that a lot of people ask me actually regarding music is, where should you get your music? And there are different sources, because you cannot publish every song that you want on YouTube without getting a copyright claim, right? So what you want to do is, if you want to have free music, you can simply go to YouTube. They have in the left sidebar, they have this like YouTube music library. You can also just Google music library YouTube and you will find it. And there they have a lot of free songs that you can use that are generally not the best, but you can at least use them for free. It's good for starting out. What you can also do to get free music, you can either go to SoundCloud or also to YouTube and just type in non-copyright music or Creative Commons music into the search bar, because there are some channels that publish free music that you can use for your videos. And apart from that, there are also paid platforms that I use. Like I personally use Artlist and Soundstripe. Artlist, in my opinion, has the most cinematic footage. It's actually my favorite, but I also use Soundstripe because, well, Soundstripe is also great, and sometimes like some songs that I find there fit the video that I want to produce a bit better. And apart from that, if you want to get one of those subscriptions, it's always subscription. Like Artlist has a yearly subscription, and in Soundstripe you can pay either monthly or yearly. Like monthly you pay a bit more at the bottom line. And yeah, that's why I think that most of you guys would probably choose Soundstripe, because especially if you're just starting out and if you maybe only want to create one travel video every few months or so, then yeah, you just don't have a high budget to like pay upfront for 1 year, right? So in that case, Soundstripe would make a bit more sense for you. There's also Epidemic Sound if you only want to publish your video on YouTube, and I also think on Facebook and Instagram and so on. But if you want to do a bit more for your video, if you want to publish it on other platforms, or if you like want to also create a travel video for a client or whatever, then it's better you use Soundstripe or Artlist, because there you can also do that. And Epidemic Sound is only for YouTube and some other social media platforms. So that's why I personally don't use Epidemic Sound. It's just not flexible enough. And then of course, what a lot of people use and what became pretty popular in over recent years, especially because of some colder and so on, is transitions. And especially beginners use transitions usually too much. Like if you want to use some like cool looking transitions, like zoom transitions, swipe transitions or whatever, you can use them, but you don't use them too much, and only use them in a way that really adds to the video, that looks good, that fits the story or whatever. For example, a zoom transition could be good if, let's say, you have a nice shot with a like city where you're on a mountain and you watch over the city or whatever, then you zoom into one place in the city and it actually looks nice how the zoom goes into the next shot where you're in the city. Like then it makes story sense, and then it also looks good. But for example, if you just zoom in randomly into the ocean and suddenly you're in the city, like what? It doesn't fit the story, it doesn't look good, it doesn't make any sense, so don't use a transition in that case. Of course, there are other transitions. For example, what I do a lot is simply that, for example, when I do a side movement with a GoPro, is that I simply like move the GoPro pretty quick at the end, because then you can easily make like a speed ramp transition where you maybe speed it even up more at the end, and then on the next clip you make the same movement at the beginning and then you shoot your clip. And when you put this clip stand together so that you have like this in and out movement at the beginning and the end, then you have a transition that the eyes can't really follow anymore. So this is like a more organic transition, and it generally looks a bit better. What's good for this transition or this type of transition is that if like the footage, at least at the end and at the beginning, look similar, because then you can notice the transition even less. So just a quick tip here, but really be careful with transitions, guys. They are very overused and they can make your videos look very cheap, especially when your video, there's no story there, the color grading is not that great, and then you only use transitions, it looks very cheap, and yeah, that's not really engaging anymore. But apart from that, what you can also do to enhance your travel videos is to simply use voiceovers, especially when you want to create a story, because when you only show the B-roll footage, then there is no story, there's no context for it. And even if you put the clips in an order that it actually makes sense and that it, like at least for you, looks like it has a story, doesn't necessarily mean that the viewer sees the story. So you can actually use voiceovers to put them over your video and to tell a bit about what are you doing there, or say some other stuff that fits to the clips. Like I actually did that in my travel recap 2017 video. I will link that here. There I used some voiceovers to create a story, and let's say, just imagine that the voiceovers wouldn't be there, then the complete video wouldn't have a story, I would say. So yeah, just watch that video for a good example. And apart from that, I also produced another video where I gave you a tutorial on how you can easily and especially cheaply produce great sounding voiceovers, even if you travel, if you're in a hotel room or whatever. So just check it out. I will also link it here and in the description below, because yeah, that helps you a lot to make your voiceovers sound at least some kind of professional. Of course, it's not 100% studio quality, but it sounds a lot better than just speaking in your computer's microphone or having some room tone in the background or so on. So yeah, just check out this video. So let's come to an end here. It was actually a bit longer than I thought. I think I talked for half an hour or so now. I hope I can squeeze it a bit together, but I hope that it was a good overview, at least over like how you can produce great travel videos with your GoPro. I hope you got some good tips from it. And of course, also like mentioned already a few times in the video, check out my other videos to get more in-depth about some specific stuff. And of course, I want to help you even more to enhance your travel videos, because well, I want to make YouTube more beautiful, and when I search for a place where I want to go and see travel videos, then I really want to see beautiful videos and not just some like cheaply cut together stuff. That's actually why I do this channel. And so of course I want to help you a bit more. So what you can do to help me, to help you improve your travel videos, is to at first leave a comment. So just ask some questions or make some suggestions on content that you want to see more about. And also I recently created a Facebook group called Travel Video Creators that you can join. In that group we help each other, so you can ask questions. You can also post your recent travel video there. Please post it directly in the group and not over YouTube. I don't like that. And yeah, then we can also give you suggestions on how to improve and so on. So that's also good for helping. And of course, I also publish one video every Sunday where I give you tutorials and generally help you to improve your travel videos. So don't forget to hit the subscribe and notifications button now to don't miss out my upcoming videos. Yeah, so that's everything for today. I hope you liked it, and see you next Sunday.